Okay, welcome to 3D Character Modelling and Animation, the Character Workshop. Today's session, session 5, is going to deal with rigging basics as part 1 of rigging. And in this session I'm going to talk a little bit about the organisation and preparation, drawing a skeleton, local rotational axis, inverse kinematics, and a bit of mirroring. And obviously there's going to be tips and things through the section. Okay, so first of all, you got to the end of your texturing, and one thing that you need to do when you get to the end of texturing is sort of clean your scene up an awful lot, just so that you can kind of get everything nice and tidy. So the first thing I'm going to do here is, if you go into the hypergraph, the hypergraph, and then just have a look at any sort of arbitrary nodes in there and get rid of them. Also do things like come in, select your character and your whatever meshes are, and delete by type history. Also you wanna do things like modifying freeze transformations. If I go to modify freeze transformations, which will set all of them to 0, and well, apart from the scale, obviously, because you want 1 on the scale. Modify reset transformations, so if you've got any pivot points that are not quite accurate, it'll take them down to 0. Actually, one thing I shouldn't have done there was if I just undo that last one. When I don't want to reset transformations on the eye, I actually want see, I've already done that by mistake. If I just undo that, so if I undo that last one. Okay, so select the eye again, like so. No, that's a good example actually why I don't want to reset the transformations on the eye, because what that does is resetting transformation puts a pivot point back to the origin, and we actually want the eye's pivot point to be there. So I just want to reset transformation on the character, reset transformations. Okay, so that's reasonably clean at the moment. Other things you can do are you can come in here, you can go to optimize scene size, so click on that, press OK. Now what that does is that cleans any of the rubbish out your scene, but if you look at the optimize scene size preferences, you can actually decide what it optimizes. I just use the defaults there, edit, reset settings, but you can go in there and kind of dig into that a bit more if you want to really make it a smaller scene size. As you're working with Maya, sometimes when you're working modelling and texturing and what have you, you can get lots of unnecessary things that are happening in the scene, and that just gets rid of some of the stuff. Now, another good practice, I think I've spoken about it before, is to export selected. Now, I'm not going to do that now, but you can actually go out there and export everything, and then re-import everything. And that enables you to clean the scene out a bit more. But we don't have a problem, so I won't do that now. Okay, also it's a good idea to name the character, so if I come in here, mesh, or you can give it a name if you wanted, and what I like to do as well is come in here, select that, see, looking at it, that's the right hand side of his face, the right eye, but I like to name the conventions as though you're the actual character. So if I name that his left eye, so again here, so left underscore eye, and the same thing over here with right underscore eye. Oh, I made a slight mistake with the capital O there, so I'll just change that. Doesn't really matter as long as you keep consistency. There we go. Okay, so we've now got a reasonably sorted out scene. So if I save that scene, so let's come in here and save that as what should I call it? Something like that. Ready for rigging. You see I've already done it there. I won't save it because I've already done it, but there we go. So we've got a nice clean scene that we can sort of move forward with. What I also want to do is get ready for the rigging. I'm gonna add the objects here to a layer. Press this button here. Again, if I'm going to be very good about my naming conventions, I would call this mesh. Now, the reason why I've done this is because I want to be able to quickly template this character, so I can start drawing a skeleton and not select it and move it. I can also reference it. Also, if I press this button, when I make, I'll show you what that does in a second, but I'm going to start to draw a skeleton inside this. So we've got into a reasonable position now to start drawing a skeleton. So I'm going to come into my side view, so I'm going to start drawing a skeleton from this from the side view. This is important because when you draw a skeleton, you should never do it in perspective view. Let me show you why. So if I go to skeleton joint tool, okay, I'm going to reset the settings. If I start drawing a skeleton in here, what's actually happening is it's snapping to the grid, which is clearly not what you want, and you can make lots of unnecessary mistakes by doing it that way. So if you come in and do it from the side view, you can get more accuracy in what you're doing. So again, if I come in and I'm going to start from about, let's go, the ball of this leg will rotate from about here. Let's go to his knee, which is about there. Now what's important here is that you notice I've been putting the ankle joint is about here, and then the toe joint is about there, and so forth and so forth. What is important to mention here is this don't make a straight line down here. You'll get into problems with your IK later on, but essentially I wanted this to be nice and a little kink there, which when we put the IK in, will tell my that's the direction you want it to move. Now it's slightly too large for what we're doing now, so I just need to change the size of my my joints. So if I go to my display, and right, let's see, well, remember where these is. Oh, there we go. It's joint size. So I just take this down to a reasonable size. We can get a much more accurate understanding of where these joints are going to be put. So that looks pretty good, actually. You know, just have a quick check. Yep, that looks pretty good. Now, you don't need to be too worried about the accuracy here. Obviously, these joints are going to be used to link onto some of these vertices, and you're going to skin them. But as long as they're in the right place, roughly, you can sort of move them a little bit. I mean, you know, for example, if I press insert here, I can kind of, you know, start like a cherry picking, which is pressing the up and down arrows. I can actually go in and start increasing my accuracy. But I mean, you know, I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about that. So at the moment I press insert again and it brings it back out into this view. So I want to go back into perspective at the moment. Now obviously because I've made this from the side, we don't want his leg isn't going to be there, is it? So we need to come and use our quad view and turn smooth shading on again and turn this on so I can see where the joints are going. Now if I move it across, you'll see his legs are slightly bent out. Now it's not fantastic practice that, but what I'd like you to do, rather than actually moving these joints, like moving it there and then moving it like so, you're not going to continue to get this nice straight line. So what I think is an appropriate thing to do at this stage is just to use the rotate here, just to make it so that fits into the character. Okay. Now there's a problem around this area because you're actually introducing a rotate on the something called the local rotational axis. But I'll talk about that in a second. We can get around this problem. Okay, so moving on to local rotational axes now. I mentioned them. Now what we have in Maya is obviously you've got a rotation joint here. So if I, sorry, I'm pressing something else here. Let me just open that up again. If I come into my perspective view here, wrong one. No, that's what I'm looking for. Now you've got a rotation here, which you can literally rotate your character. Okay. Now that's fine, but what a local rotational axis is, let me just turn it on. It's pretty easy to turn it on and then show you. So if I select my joints here, and I've already set myself a shortcut up here. So if I go actually display, head to display, let me bring my shelf back in here. I've set a custom attribute. Oh no, I haven't. Yes, I have. There it is, local rotational axis, and I'll show you what happens when I turn it on. So if I press the local rotational axis, okay, you can actually put this button on the shelf by pressing Control and Shift and going display object, and where is it? It's transform display local rotational axis. Now because I'm pressing Shift and Control, it'll put you a little button on there, and that's where that local rotational axis has come from. Okay, but some more to the point, if I just for a second hide this, what we've got here is we've got the X, Y, Z coordinates of each joint. Now Maya uses these to rotate them around. Now they're not immensely important at the moment. What makes them important is basically when you're working in the graph editor, you want them to be, your local rotational axes to be consistent with what you're doing. So most people sort of talk about positive z's and things, but it doesn't really matter as long as you know where they are and they're consistent. So for example, if I select this here and then rotate the positive, not positive z, yeah, positive z, okay, it rotates, and it rotates in the sort of the main area that the joint is moving. Okay, now the same thing on this. If I again, we see this will be negative z because this z is pointing this way. So if I rotate this way, this is inconsistent and it's slightly different to the other one, the knee joint. So if I rotate this, okay, see how because x and y are here, it's going the other way around. So it's quite important to make sure that these are working. Now I could, if I wanted to, go in there and edit them individually. So if I select that joint and I press I press this button, which brings out the component mode, and I press this button, I can actually select the local rotational axis, and I can actually move it around 180 degrees and do it by eye and sort of get it working in the same way, so they're all consistent there now. That's kind of an okay thing to do if you're working with stuff that needs to be that accurate. But there's a better way of doing this. So if I come back out of this view, now the better way of doing it, what you should really do is you need to use this tool. So if I get a skeleton and orient joint, right? This tool. Now this is not going to work at the moment because I've actually rotated this. So you can see on the top view here, I've rotated my the Y joint by 1.914. So when I press this, it'll give me an error message. It's skipping joint 1, which is the first joint. Now, what I need to do first is I need to freeze the transformations on these joints. So if I go modify, freeze transformations, I want to make sure I click on joint orient, and now watch what happens. There you go. So basically, it's taken all those local rotational axes and it's moved them so they're all facing in the world coordinates here, the x, y, z. Now you'll notice it didn't change the rotations on them, but it did zero these rotations out. Okay. Now I then need to, so that's a good thing to start off by doing. Then if I come into my skeleton and joint orient and do the same thing again, this time if I reset the tool and press this XYZ on here, and that's just to do with the direction of the XYZ, and this is just like a consistency thing. If I press orient, it turns them all round to be a consistent way. Okay. Now this depends on how you're dealing with things. I mean, you can see the X will be pointing down each of the joints, and depending on the situation of each one, it points basically towards the X points towards the child node, and the X, Y, Z are dictated to in the same way that you're you had a second ago with the things. Now you can go in and you can actually, if you, for example, if you've got a fingers and something doesn't go at 90 degrees and you want it to sort of go off at a local rotation axis. So for example, this one here is slightly wrong. So what I can do is I can come in and again, like I showed you before, I can select it and I can make sure that that's going to work in the way I want it to. So if you got a character, I don't know, that didn't walk straight line like a cowboy or something, you can kind of go in and you can change things like so. Okay, don't worry about the end. The end is fine because you're not going to be rotating that. That's just going to be going to be fine. So there we go. So that's sort of like local rotational axis. Okay, so what I also need to do is just kind of get rid of these local rotational axes for the time being, because we've sort of sorted those out now. So if I come in and I press them again there, now I've got rid of them, so I can always turn them back on if I need to. One thing we're going to do now is we're going to mirror this character, and there's a few ways I can do this. I want to put something called IK on this first before I mirror it, because it'll mirror the IK for me. But before I do that, I want to continue to add to the skeleton here. So I'm going to come back in and I'm going to create myself a joint tool, and I want to basically make a joint that is going to be the center of the hierarchy here, the root node. So I'm going to make this joint, and I came to the side view, and I want to make it at the origin essentially. So if I come back into my side view. No, I did it from the side because obviously I want I wanted to make sure that that joint was going to be right in the centre. So I'm going to bring it back like so and put it somewhere like that, because I want the spine to be going up the back of the character. Okay, so let's not move that there. So I'm going to put it in there. I'm now, rather than, I'm just going to select that and select that and press P. Now I know this has already had a frozen transformations. Obviously it's got translations because it's in the world space coordinates, but it's got no rotation, so I'm happy with that. Okay, so before I continue, what you also need to do is you need to come in and name these, because I want to make sure that they're going to be accurate and be, you know, all the way through. So if I name that root, okay, and this is going to be if I forget, it's his left joint, so left underscore hip, and then if I come down here and right, oh sorry, left underscore knee, and so on and so forth. So yeah, did that knee, and that's ankle, so left underscore ankle, and then this one will be called ball, so this is going to be left underscore ball, and then toe. Okay, left underscore toe. Right, so I'm going to now put something called IK onto this. Now, inverse kinematics is basically a posh way of saying that you use a translation of something to resolve some rotations. Now, at the moment, if I wanted to animate this character walking, I need to rotate this one leg and then rotate that one, and then probably rotate this one straight. Okay, just to count this, that's 3 operations. Okay, but if I use something called IK, so if I come in and I open up my skeleton IK handle tool, reset the tool, I'll just quickly do this and I'll explain some of the options in a second. But this is, yeah, ooh, it looks like it's crashed. Just give me a second. Oh, it's crashed. I'll be back in a second. Okay, it's caught up with itself, so no worries there. So let me go back to the IK. So if I come in and go to my IK handle tool again, now the default on these settings are actually this thing called single chain solver, which is great for doing things like mechanical diggers and lamps, for example. But for human characters, so for the ball joint here, the actual joint on the ball can go in sort of 360 degrees. It's like a ball and socket joint. So because we want to use something called a rotate plane solver, we have something called to have a pole vector where it is, we need to use this rotate plane solver. Now I'll explain it a little bit more. I mean, it's kind of essentially I explained it there with the fact that this is a joint that's not just a slide joint. It's not like a mechanical digger joint that has no give in the sideways movement. So if I click on this now, which is what we need, and if I show you what I mean, this is called a rotate. This is called a pole vector, and what this does is it tells Maya the direction of these rotations. If I grab this, go back to grabbing this, the actual IK handle, oops, and move it up, you'll see the knee is orientated. So if I go back to the this manipulate handle and select the IK pole vector, the pole vector is basically manipulated to point towards the knee is pointing towards the pole vector. So that's really what we want for this type of joint, because it enables you to have much more control over the final outcome of the animation. It gives you extra control. So if I go back into where are we? Skeleton IK handle tool. Now there's another thing in here. So I want this to be a rotate plane solver, not a single chain solver. So that's not so the default is if I reset the tool, the default is single chain. You want it to be rotate plane. I also want to use this thing called sticky. Now sticky is essentially it's pretty reasonably straightforward, but when you're animating a character and you actually, it's probably easier to show you what sticky is rather than try to explain it. If I just quickly mirror this, so if I come in and skeleton and I go to mirror joint, so I'll get back to the sticky thing in a second. Again, if I reset settings, but I want to mirror it along here. So if I press mirror, you'll see I'm mirroring that. So obviously you just need to set these settings. What I should have done actually, if I delete that, what I should have done, because I've named everything, I want Maya to look for left underscore, and I want to replace it with right underscore. Okay, so I've changed the XY, the YZ, so I want to mirror it in the Y and Z plane, and I want to basically make sure that it's it's going to look for anything in the chain called L underscore, and it's going to replace it with right underscore. So if I apply that, so you now see I've got a chain down here, and it's called right hip, and that's called left hip. Okay, so that's mirroring. If I go back to the IK plane and the sticky, so if I go back to skeleton and IK, I'm losing my track here, IK handle, click sticky on one of them. So if I click this one on sticky, and then if I come back in and IK handle tool and take sticky off, like so. Okay, so simply put, I can grab the thing, and you'll notice that when I move that down, sticky enables the foot to stay. Not rocket science, is it? Enables the foot to stay where it's supposed to be, and this basically only enables me now to the other IK handle. You actually have to set a key to enable. If I press S to set a key to enable that to stay in the same place. So it's just a bit of a workflow thing. I would recommend, certainly on joints. On the leg joints, I would recommend sticky. I wouldn't on the hands, because you don't want them to be sticky anyway, because you want them to be you want them to work with the arcs and things when you're animating the character. So so that's I think sticky I put on both of them. You can change it in the attribute editor, but we'll leave that as it is. Okay, let me just have a quick refer to my notes. Okay, I'll try to finish off on the IK. Actually, I just realised I've missed something slightly out. I wanted to just describe a little bit more. What IK is really useful for is as I said before, resolving rotations of a number of joint rotations using translation. So it speeds your workflow up really. That's what any rigging does. Any riggings just speed your workflow up. But what I didn't kind of explain the disadvantages. Now basically, when you're working with IK, the problem with IK is that you often you can spot people's working with IK because the people ignore the arcs in the animation. Okay, so if I was animating, for example, a baseball player and he was hitting a baseball, the arcs of how he swings the bat will be very important. So when I want one by arcs is let's say you put a dot on the end of his hand, and you did like a trailing, like a ghosting effect on that dot, you would see a lovely big arc in the way that somebody swung the baseball bat. Okay. Now with IK, you can imagine, because you're using translations, you'd have to put several different translations and spend a lot of time working those arcs out to make it effective. So that's a disadvantage of IK. So it's not always necessary. Some people tend to not use IK in arms because because rotations make mirror more of a natural rigging system for an arm. But again, there are ways around this, and in the IK handle, there's actually this thing called IK blend, which you can turn on and off. So if I can put it on 0, and I can then actually come in and actually animate the natural arcs. So so I can animate this like I would be animating a normal sort of forward kinematics. So just to be aware that there are certainly limitations from an IK point of view, and you need to be aware of them when you're rigging and then obviously animating. Okay, so what we've got here, we've got a character that I've just I've reloaded up just for speed really, so I don't have to spend too much time and talk at you for ages, which I've made the rest of the character. Now you'll notice, just want to talk through a little bit, that I've put some ribs in this character. Now it's not as important for this particular character because it's quite thin. If I just untemplate the mesh and turn it back on, there we go. Oh. Let's turn it back on and let's turn the joints on here. It's hard to say, I'm afraid. Actually, I'll keep him on. If I keep him on, that's better. So what I've done here is I've made the skeleton go down the back of the character. Now the reason why I've done it this way is because I want the I want to mirror as close as I can a natural deformation of a person. Now, obviously our backbone is at the back and our ribs come round. Now, I've put these ribs in here, and I don't necessarily need them, but I've put them in here to assist me with the skinning process. Skinning, basically, when I put a skin on this, I will select the root node and I will assign some of these vertices on the character to certain joints. Now, if I add more joints in here, that's going to enable me to get more control over what I do with these vertices, and then hopefully it will deform. Well, it will deform more accurately to a human character. So, so that's kind of why I've done that. Also, you'll notice that I've put a joint in here for the clavicle, which will enable me to start the IK from here and just have some kind of up and down movement. Another thing I mentioned as well is you notice on the head here, I've put some arbitrary joints in here that you don't actually need, other than for rigging purposes. So I've put a joint in here which then relates to top and bottom jaw. Also, you'll notice what I've done with the eyes. I have put this little point in the middle here, which is a selection handle, and you notice I've actually snapped my my joint to the selection handle. Now, the reason why I've done that is because I want the. Sorry, just give me a second. A student's just turned up. Just a minute. So, sorry, a student turned up, and I'll just finish this quickly off, and then I can deal with the student. But yeah, I've put the joint in the centre of the head, and I snapped this particular joint, this eye joint, to the actual character. This was the reason why I did this, was because I want this eye to be in the correct place, and I'll basically link this eye onto this joint, and then if I want to do something with the eye, I can move the joint, but I want it to move around with the head as accurately as possible. And also, you'll notice the same thing I've done with the eyebrows, and made a selection handle on here, and then I've linked it into the joint. This just gives me a bit more flexibility. I've also brought the joint up to the top of the head, and this is mainly for skinning purposes. I could add another few in here, and so that the head would get skinned properly, but let's say I wanted to add a hat to the character. I'd have a place to like a place to link the hat to, and it also helps me with the skinning process. So you know, this is kind of where I'm at mainly. One other thing as well I want to just quickly explain. Now, obviously, with the hand here, I've not put IK on it yet, but I wanna. I don't know if anyone knows about the anatomy of a human, but essentially in this bit here you've got two joints, and the reason why you've got two joints there in a normal person is because you can actually rotate your hand at least 180 degrees. Okay, probably even more with some people. So you know, but if I rotate this here, I have no wrist joint here. I've got a wrist, but if I rotate this wrist, there's quite a lot of distance in the vertices between here and here. So some people like to put an extra joint in here. So if I come into my skeleton and insert joint tool, and the reason why I'm doing it this way rather than clicking a few different joints is because I can select this insert joint tool, and I can select it where, so go to the top view, I can explain this a bit more accurately. I can put this perfectly in place. Okay, if what I mean by that is along this particular line here. But if I go to my attribute editor, the problem with doing this is I do not want any rotations from when I do IK in this backwards and forwards position. So I need to limit this information. So what I need to do is I need to take off Y and Z, like so. That means that I'm not going to be able to rotate on a Y, and I'm not going to be able to rotate the Z, but I will be able to rotate the X, which is the exact movement I want for the wrist movement. Okay, and when if I come back in here now and put the IK on here, so if I come in and I'll just do it normally, skeleton IK handle tool, like so, that means if I wouldn't have put the limiting on, that means when I move this stays straight. If I take this limiting off, I'm not even sure what this is going to do. Actually, we'll see. Yeah, you see how it moves in this kind of circular method. So putting that limiting on, certainly with the IK, if I turn it back on and see what happens. So if I take that off, I'm doing it in a completely wrong way now. So if I just go back and do it again, you saw what happened, didn't you? Basically. It's messed it all up, but you did see what happened. I limited it first. It's not allowing me to go back because I've done it all the wrong way around, like so. nope, I've completely messed that one up, but you get the idea, because I turned it on and off, and that enabled me to limit it and enable the IK to work properly. Okay, that's kind of it that I would like to get people to that stage by the end of this week. But just to sort of talk about, I don't really need to talk too much about the hands. I'll just press pause. Okay, the hands essentially, again, it's like any kind of skinning process. You need to make sure that that you've put joints in where you need them to be. Try and space them out evenly. Don't make sure you don't make them all on like a flat tennis racket and have them so that they so you can the thumb is coming down, so it's kind of mirroring the natural deformations of the character. With regards the head, again, I've kind of explained a little bit about the skinning parts of that. Now, a few things just to remember as a sort of summary, really. Try and name everything. Make sure that you name stuff going through. It's going to save you time and stuff in the rigging process. It's going to really help you. You need to obviously make sure your local rotations are sorted out by freezing transformations and then using the joint orient tool. Don't forget to then obviously work with the IK. Also, you can change the size of manipulators. It's quite useful by pressing plus and minus in certain circumstances, and especially with the rotate, it can be quite interesting to do that. Obviously, the bigger that you get them, you can actually make smaller movements, and it can be quite useful as a way of increasing your accuracy. Then, what I would recommend people do is once they get to this kind of stage, obviously you need to start mirroring everything. So if I put this joint in here, so if I come in and if I put the insert joint tool in again, like so, and I'll just X and Z, and I'll just put the IK handle on there, so skeleton, IK handle tool. Now I've probably got sticky on there, but I'm not going to worry too much at the moment. But if I come in and mirror this, okay, skeleton, mirror joint, again, same thing. Oh, wrong one. I should have done it from here. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to mirror it before I put the IK on. I'm going to put the IK on again. So if I mirror that, and then I'll put the IK on. So I'll make sure the settings are correct. So if skeleton, IK handle tool, and take. It's gone back to its default. But if I put a rotate plane tool, make sure sticky's not on. This time, rather than going from the collarbone here, I want to do some extra rigging things here. I'm going to go from the top of the arm here. Again, the same thing on this side, like so, like so. So this is kind of the stage that I want most people to get to. This is a pretty straightforward character. This is kind of very simple rigging with no real complexities there. Obviously, don't forget to name everything and use the naming conventions. And actually, you can actually mirror these as well. You know how to mirror that, 'cause I've just set the settings up. If I skeleton mirror, so if I just, because obviously it's a really speedy thing to do, I just press G at these different points. There we go, job done. You can then sort of start to really whack yourself a skin on there. So if I come in and untemplate the mesh. No, I won't do it. But essentially, you can put a skin on there and start playing around with it and see how the joints are actually rotating with the skin. And obviously, you don't need to do too much skin at this stage. I'm just wanting to put a temp skin on there to sort of understand if the joints are in the correct positions, and just sort of check it at that point. But it is very important to be conscientious at this stage and make sure that things are working and that kind of stuff. So that's it for now. But it's yeah. Well, good luck with that anyway. So good luck.